Adding fractions and decimals. So first, let's start with a fraction like 3/4, and let's add to it 1/8. The first thing we want to look at is our denominator. Our denominator is not the same, and we need, for fractions, to add them, we need to find a common denominator, which means the same denominator. So these do not match. We need to figure out how we're going to get them to match. So I'm going to look for the least common multiple of both of them, the first number that both of them will divide evenly into. Well, I start with the smaller number, 4. I know 4 is not going to work because 8 will not divide into it evenly. The next number would be 8, and 8 would work. So I know that my denominator is going to be 8. Well, what I'm looking at is, at my 4, I need to figure out how do I get from 4 to 8. Well, I know 4 times 2 is 8. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 3 times 2 is 6. So my fraction now is 6/8, which is equivalent to 3/4. It just looks different. On the bottom, 8 to 8, well, that means all I'm doing is that stays the same because it's already an 8. Okay, so then I'm going to add these two, and I'm just going to add the numerator 6 plus 1 like I normally would, and then the denominator stays the same. So I know 6/8 plus 1/8 is 7/8. Now, if we wanted to do a fraction, a decimal, 3/4 we know is 75 hundredths. That's one of our benchmarks. 1/8 is another one of our benchmarks and is 125 thousandths. So I'm just going to add a 0 so that they both are sitting in the same place value, and then add them up. 0 plus 5 is 5, 5 plus 2 is 7, 7 plus 1 is 8. Bring down your decimal. 875 thousandths, which I know from my benchmark fractions that those two match. Okay, let's look at another one. You can try this first and then check it with me. Let's try 3/8, and we'll add 4/5 to that. Okay, so I look at my denominator. They are not the same. I need to find a common denominator. I'm going to start with the lower number, 5. And I know 8 will not go into 5 evenly, so then we go to 10. 8 still will not. 15, no. 20, no. 25, no. 30, no. 35, no. But 40, yes, 40 is our first common number that both of these numbers will divide evenly into. So I know that my new denominator is going to be 40. So I look at 8, and how do I get to 40? Well, I know 8 times 5 is 40. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 3 times 5 is 15. Then I go to the bottom, 5 to 40. I know 5 times 8 is 40. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 4 times 8 is 32. And then we're going to add them up. Add your numerator, denominator stays the same. What I noticed is I ended up with an improper fraction. I can tell because my numerator is larger than my denominator. Remember how we get improper to a proper fraction is we use our top dog in the house. So we're going to put 47 in our division house. 40 goes outside. 40 goes in once, subtract. Now my quotient of 1 is my whole number, my remainder of 7 is my numerator, and my divisor of 40 is my denominator, and those two stay the same. Now I was able to get a mixed fraction, which what happened is 3/8 is part of a whole, 4/5 is part of a whole, but when we combine them, the two went over one whole, so we have a whole and a little bit more. So with decimals, I could do the same thing. We've got 3/8, and I know that 3/8 is 0.375 because that's a benchmark, and then 4/5, I know that that is 8/10, but I want to make my place values sit in the same, so I'm going to just add some zeros and then add them up. add them. 9, 10, 11, I'm going to carry. I'm going to bring down my decimal, bring down my 1. So even though 1 and 7/40ths don't seem to match 1 and 175 thousandths, remember it's because this is 40ths. This is, if we wrote a fraction, it would be this. So if I increased my 7/40ths to get to the thousandths place, it would match 175 thousandths. So either way is going to work. You can do fractions or decimals, whichever one you're more comfortable with. Okay, let's try another one. We'll start off with this stuff. Okay, let's start off with, we're going to add a fourth to a third. First thing I check, denominators are not the same. Well, I know that I'm going to start with the 3. 4 does not go into 3. 4 does not go into 6 or 9, but it does go into 12. So my first or least common multiple between the two is 12. So I know my denominator will be 12. I need to figure out how to get from 4 to 12. I know that's times 3. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Second one, 1/3. How do I get from 3 to 12? That's times 4. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So now I just add 4 and 3, and my denominator stays the same. So my answer is going to be 7/12. Now with the decimal with this one, it's going to be a little bit different. We'll start with a fourth. And 1/4 is, we know, 25 hundredths or 0.25. Now a third, that's one of our special fractions that the numbers repeat. Remember, that's the repeating 3. We usually show it like this, just meaning that if the 3 is going to go on forever and ever and ever, it's got to stop at some point. We just kind of put that hat over it to show repeating. Well, with decimals, I'm going to do the same thing, but because I have the 25 hundredths, I'm going to add a second 3. I'm just going to put that repeating over to the 1, 3 to show that the 3 is repeating, not 33. And we can add them up. And it ends up at 58 hundredths. Well, again, these two don't match, 7/12 and 58 hundredths. But because this is a repeating number, it might be off just a little bit, but if we got 12 near the hundredths place, our numerator would be very similar. So again, even if you have a third, you can at least get close to the answer. It may not be exact just because of that repeating number. So what if we had 1 and 1/4? We actually were adding with mixed numbers. Let's add 1 and 2/5. So when we're adding whole numbers with fractions, we're going to start the same way. We're looking at denominator. It's not the same. We need to find a common. So I know 4, 5 is not going to go into that. 8, 5 is not going to go in evenly. 12, no. 16, no. 20, yes. The first thing is we're going to change our denominator so it is the same or common. 5 times what gives me 20? Well, it's 5 times 4. And then whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. And then 4 times 5 I know is 20. And then whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So I end up with 5/20ths and 8/20ths, but I'm going to bring over my whole number. So add your fractions. 8 and 5 is 13. Denominator stays the same. And then my whole numbers, I'm just going to add like I normally would. I know 1 plus 1 is 2. Can I reduce it? No, it's in its form. Okay, so with the decimal, 1 and 1/4, well, I know that my 1/4 is 25 hundredths or 0.25, and I just put the 1 whole in front of it. 1 and 2/5, I know 2/5 is same as 4/10, add the zero so that the place values are from the same, and add your whole. Bring down your decimal. And again, I'm in the hundreds, so if I took my 20 and went to 100, it would be the same thing. So either decimal or fraction would work. Just with fractions, remember you have to find a common denominator and your denominator stays the same.